The betrayal proof landed on the table like a stone dropped into still water. It hit the polished surface of the conference table and slid, slowly, almost deliberately, until it stopped right in front of Yoon Seo-jun. He did not move. He did not blink. He simply looked at it the way a man looks at something he does not yet want to believe is real. The photograph showed his wife. Taegist. She was standing outside a restaurant in Gangnam, dressed in a long camel coat, her dark braided hair pinned back. She was handing something, an envelope, small and brown, to a man that Seo-jun recognized immediately. A man named Cho Byung-hak. The street fixer. The middleman. The person that every criminal organization in Seoul knew was connected to the Seo faction, the one rival that had been drawing blood from Seo-jun's operation for the past 8 months. Seo-jun sat at the head of the table. Around him were 7 of his most senior men. The room was on the 14th floor of a building that, from the outside, looked like a law firm. The windows were tinted. The carpet was dark. The kind of room where decisions were made that never appeared in any newspaper. Park Min-jae, Seo-jun's right hand, his oldest friend, the man who had been by his side since they were 19 years old running errands for an older boss, was standing to his right. It was Min-jae who had placed the photograph on the table. His face was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. That jaw only got tight when something was serious. "There's more," Min-jae said quietly. He laid down 3 more photographs. Then a printed bank statement. Then a paper showing a series of encrypted message logs that had been decoded by their tech team. The bank statement showed a transfer of 42 million won from one of Seo-jun's private accounts that only 4 people in the world knew existed, to an untraceable number registered under a shell company. The transfer had happened 11 days ago. On a Tuesday. Between 2 and 3 in the morning. The message logs showed brief, coded exchanges between a number registered to a prepaid SIM and the Seo faction's known communication channel. Short messages. Just coordinates and times. But when Minji's team had cross-referenced those coordinates with Seo-jun's own operational movements over the past 6 weeks, every single one matched. The ambush in Mapo 3 weeks ago, where 4 of Seo-jun's men had been hit, 1 critically. That was on the list. The intercept of their shipment near the port in Incheon, a delivery that had been planned in total silence, discussed only inside their inner circle. That was on the list too. Seo-jun stared at the documents for a long time. "Who else has seen these?" he asked. His voice was calm. That was the terrifying thing about Yoon Seo-jun. He was 32 years old. He had inherited a crumbling operation at the age of 26 and rebuilt it into the most feared organization in the capital within 4 years. He had done it not through reckless violence, but through patience and precision. He did not raise his voice because he never needed to. "Only the people in this room," Min-jae said. One of the other men, a heavy-set enforcer named Tak, shifted in his chair. "Boss, we all know what this means. The information that leaked, the money, the coordinates, it all points to someone inside the household. Someone with access to your private accounts and your schedule." No one said Taegist's name. They didn't have to. Seo-jun pushed his chair back and stood. "Where is she now?" Min-jae hesitated. "Just barely. She's home." Seo-jun buttoned the top button of his jacket. He looked at the photograph one more time, his wife, the envelope, the street fixer, and then he looked up at the room full of men watching him. "Keep this contained," he said. "No one speaks. No one acts. Not yet." He walked out. He did not go home immediately. Instead, he drove himself, something he rarely did, through the rain-slicked streets of Seoul. He needed to think without anyone watching his face. The city was loud even at this hour. Neon signs bled color into the wet pavement. Street food vendors packed up their carts. A group of young people spilled out of a bar laughing about something that had nothing to do with photographs on conference tables, and Seo-jun watched them through the windshield and felt, for one strange second, the complete foreignness of a life built entirely on edges. He had chosen this life. He reminded himself of that. He had not been born into it, he had walked toward it with clear eyes and decided it was worth the cost. He had made that calculation and he lived with it every day. But there were moments, usually late and usually in the rain, when the weight of every decision he had ever made stacked itself on his chest and he had to breathe through it. This was one of those moments. He thought about Tigist. They had been married for 3 years. She was from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He had met her in Tokyo at a business function, a legitimate one, tied to an import company he held as a front. She had been there representing a trade organization. She was sharp in conversation. She laughed at things that were actually funny and stayed quiet when other people talked too much. He had noticed her specifically because she was not trying to be noticed. He had pursued her. She had not made it easy. That had been the first thing he respected about her. She knew what he was, not all of it, not at first, but enough. She had figured it out before he told her, and when she confronted him about it, she did not scream or threaten to leave. She asked him a single question, "Are you the kind of man who can look me in the eye?" He had said yes. She had decided to believe him. He had never given her access to his accounts. He had never discussed operations with her. He kept that wall up not because he distrusted her, but because he believed in protecting her by keeping her ignorant. But now the evidence said otherwise. He forced himself to go through it carefully. To not let emotion blur his thinking. She had changed 3 weeks ago. He could feel it now in hindsight. She had become quieter at home. More careful with her words. She had started leaving the house at odd hours, once after 10 at night, claiming she needed fresh air and returning an hour later. She had deflected when he asked where she went. He had let it go because he trusted her. Because he was busy. Because he had told himself there was nothing to worry about. The ambush in Mapo had happened on a night when she had been out of the house for 2 hours. He had not connected the two at the time. He gripped the steering wheel. He also remembered that 6 weeks ago, he had spoken, very briefly, very vaguely, about the Incheon shipment while he was on a call in their home office. Tigist had brought him coffee during that call. He had thought nothing of it. He had lowered his voice when she entered, but not enough. Not if she had been listening. The picture in his mind was filling in, and he hated every stroke of it. He parked outside a convenience store. He sat in the car for several minutes. Then he called Min Jae. "Bring her to the safe house in Dabong," he said. "Don't scare her. Tell her I asked for her to come. But bring her." "And then?" Min Jae asked. "Wait for me." When Seo Jun arrived at the Dabong safe house, a nondescript 3-floor building that officially belonged to a logistics company, Tigist was already there. She was sitting at a table in the second-floor room. She was not restrained. There were 2 men standing near the door, but they were not touching her. She had her hands folded on the table in front of her. She was wearing the same camel coat from the photograph. She must have been out when Minji's men found her. She looked up when Seo Jun walked in. He shut the door behind him. The 2 men stepped out without being told. He sat down across from her and said nothing. She said nothing either. This was the part he had not expected. In his head, on the drive over, he had imagined her being scared. Being defensive. Or crying. Tigist was not a woman who cried easily, but he had imagined it anyway because that is what people do when they are cornered. She was not scared. She was not defensive. She was watching him with an expression that was close to calm, not the calm of someone who felt innocent, but the calm of someone who had already decided something and was living inside that decision. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. "I have an idea," she said. "Then explain it to me." She held his gaze. "I can't." He leaned forward slowly. "Tigist. I can't, Seo Jun. Not right now. Not here." She glanced, barely, toward the door. He understood what she meant. She was saying she did not trust whoever was on the other side of that door. But he did not know yet if that was the truth or if it was a strategy, a clever way to buy time by pretending to protect him. "You understand what the evidence shows," he said. "I understand what it looks like. Then tell me what it actually is." She pressed her lips together. Her jaw moved like she was holding something back, not tears, but words. Like she was fighting herself. "I need more time," she said finally. "A few days. Give me a few days, and I will show you everything. I will explain it all. But if I tell you now, in this room, tonight, something worse will happen. Not to me. To you." He stared at her. He had spent 12 years in this world. He knew how to read people. He knew when someone was performing and when someone was afraid. What he saw on Taijist's face in that moment was not the fear of getting caught. It was a different kind of fear, the fear of someone watching a clock tick towards something terrible. But he could not act on a feeling. Not with 42 million won and 4 ambushed men and a photograph on a table. "I can't give you days," he said. "Then God help us both," she said quietly. He stood up. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the frame. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "You'll be comfortable. But you won't leave." She nodded once. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. He walked out. He was 20 minutes away from the safe house when his phone rang. It was one of his men in the field. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice of someone delivering bad news while trying to stay professional. "Boss. The warehouse in Songdong. We just lost contact with the crew there." Seo Jun went cold. "How long ago?" 8 minutes. "Backup is moving now, but, boss, when they got there, it was already hit. 3 men down. The shipment is gone. All of it." He sat in the car and listened to the rest of the report and did not speak for a long moment after the call ended. The city continued moving around him, indifferent. Headlights swept past. A taxi honked somewhere. Normal sounds of a normal night that had nothing normal about it. Taijist was locked in a room in Dabong. She had been with Minji's men for the last hour and a half. She had not made a single call, sent a single message, or spoken to anyone outside that room. And yet another attack had just happened. He sat with that fact. If Taijist had leaked tonight's operation, she couldn't have. She had been in custody. Which meant either the leak had been sent before she was brought in, hours earlier when she was free, or Taijist was not the leak. He did not let himself run too far with that thought. One alternative possibility did not erase the photograph and the bank transfer and the message logs. But it cracked something. It cracked the clean, closed shape of the story that the evidence had seemed to tell. He drove back to the building where his senior men were gathered and walked into the room. "Someone hit Songdong tonight," he said. While our hands were full. The room shifted. He watched faces. Most of them reacted with the right kind of alarm, urgent, troubled, reaching for phones, asking questions. But one face took a half-second longer to settle into the right expression. Just half a second. Most people would not have caught it. Seo Jun caught it. He did not react. He sat down. He asked for the full operational report on Songdong. He listened. He gave instructions. And inside, quietly, he began to reassemble the picture. His tech team had been the ones to bring him the decoded message logs. They had done it through Min Jae. Min Jae had brought the entire package, the photographs, the bank statement, the messages, all at once, already compiled and printed and organized. Seo Jun thought about that. In his world, information gathered slowly. Pieces arrived separately, and you assembled them yourself. You cross-referenced. You questioned each piece. A package that arrived fully assembled and neatly organized, that was not how intelligence worked. That was how a story was told. He called his tech team directly. Not through Min Jae. Directly. He asked the head of the team, a quiet, thin man named Ryu, to come see him privately. Ryu arrived at 2 in the morning. He sat across from Seo Jun and did not waste time with pleasantries. The message logs, Seo Jun said. Walk me through how you decoded them. Ryu's expression flickered. We decoded them with the key that Team Leader Park provided. He said you had approved the intercept protocol. He gave you the decryption key. Yes, sir. Seo Jun was quiet for a moment. The SIM card that the messages were sent from. Did you trace the purchase? We tried. It was prepaid, no name. Where was it purchased? Ryu hesitated. The terminal ID traced to a convenience store in Mapo. But, sir, something was strange. I flagged it in my internal notes, but Team Leader Park said it wasn't relevant. The purchase timestamp on that SIM card was from 5 weeks ago. But the messages it sent were dated over the last 3 weeks. Meaning someone bought that SIM card 5 weeks ago and then used it to send those messages later. But the decryption key that unlocked those messages, the key Team Leader Park gave us, we had never seen that key before. It didn't match our standard intercept protocols. When I asked where it came from, he said you provided it directly. I never provided any key, Seo Jun said. The room went very still. Ryu swallowed. Sir. The bank transfer. The 42 million won. Did your team verify the origin account independently? No, sir. The statement was given to us already printed. We confirmed the account number matched one of your private accounts, but we did not pull the transfer logs ourselves. Seo Jun leaned back. The story began to invert itself. He thought about the face that had taken half a second too long to settle. He thought about a package of evidence arriving perfectly compiled. He thought about decryption keys that came from nowhere and bank statements that no one had verified independently. He thought about Park Min-jae. 13 years. They had known each other for 13 years. Min-jae had taken a knife for him once, literally, a blade meant for Seojun's side had found Min-jae's arm because Min-jae had stepped in front of it without a moment's hesitation. They had built this entire operation together. They had buried 2 friends together. They had sat at this same table and made decisions that neither of them could ever speak about outside of it. How do you look at 13 years and wonder if it was a performance? You don't want to. That is the honest answer. You do not want to. But he had taught himself a long time ago that wanting something to be false was not the same as it being false. He did not confront Min-jae that night. A man who had been careful enough to fabricate a complete set of evidence would be careful enough to have a plan for being confronted. If Seo Jun moved too early, Min-jae would activate whatever he had waiting. Instead, he spent the next 36 hours moving carefully. He pulled surveillance independently. He had Ryu's team, bypassing Min-jae entirely, trace the actual transfer logs from his private accounts. Not the printed statement. The actual digital logs, pulled directly. The 42 million won had been transferred. That part was real. But the transfer had originated not from Taijist's access, she had no access, but from a terminal registered inside their own building. The server room. Level 2. Min-jae had a keycard for Level 2. He pulled the keycard access logs for the night of the transfer. Level 2 had been accessed at 2:17 in the morning by a card registered to a maintenance worker, a ghost employee, a name on the payroll with no face attached. But the biometric entry log that was separate from the keycard system, the fingerprint scanner that had been installed 6 months ago and that most of his men had not yet fully adjusted to using, showed something different. It showed Park Min-jae. Seo Jun sat alone in the server room reading that log. The server room was cold. It always was, the machines required it. Rows of blinking lights marked the passage of data that moved through this building every hour of every day. He had built this infrastructure himself, had paid for every drive and cable and security protocol, and it was this same infrastructure that now showed him the fingerprint of the man who had used it to destroy him. He sat for a long time. He thought about the knife. About Min-jae stepping in front of it without hesitation. He thought about whether a man could carry a secret like this for years while also taking a blade for the person he intended to betray. He decided that yes, a sufficiently disciplined person could. Because the blade had been real, and the loyalty it demonstrated had bought him exactly the kind of trust he needed to do what he eventually did. The patience of it almost made Seo Jun respect it. Almost. He went to see Taijist. She had been in the safe house for 36 hours. She had not eaten much. She was seated by the window when he came in, watching the courtyard below. She looked tired but composed. He sat across from her and said, "Tell me about the meetings." She turned from the window and looked at him. Something in her expression shifted, not relief exactly, but a loosening. Like a held breath beginning to release. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Tell me from the beginning." She nodded. 8 weeks ago, she said, "I was going through some papers in your study. I wasn't looking for anything, I was looking for the insurance documents for the car. But I found something. A schedule. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know it didn't match the schedules your office kept." He listened without interrupting. There were dates and locations written in a pattern. "I know how your operations run, Seo Jun. I've watched long enough even from the outside. Those dates corresponded to your planned shipments and movements, but they were annotated, as if someone was tracking them. Planning around them. I didn't know what it meant, but I took a photograph of it on my phone and I started paying attention." She folded her hands. 2 weeks later, I was at the market and a man approached me. He gave me a card with a number on it and said one sentence, "Someone inside your husband's organization is selling him to the Seo faction. If you want proof, call this number." Then he walked away. "Who was he?" Seo Jun asked. "I found out later. His name is Detective Lim Chang-soo. He works for a financial crimes unit that has been building a case against the Seo faction for 3 years. He wasn't trying to catch you. He was trying to dismantle Seo from the outside, and he needed someone with access to your world who could confirm what was happening on the inside. So you called the number." "I called the number." She met his eyes steadily, not apologetically. "I met with him twice. The meetings were in places I thought were private. I didn't tell you because the schedule I found in your study was written in Minji's handwriting. I recognized it, I've seen his handwriting on notes he's left in the house during meetings here. I couldn't tell you what I suspected through your own operation because he was always close. He was at every meeting. He managed your communications. If I told you and he found out before you could act, you'd be dead within days." Seo Jun was quiet for a moment. "The money," he said. "The transfer." "I know about the transfer," she said. "That was not me. But I know who it was. Lim Chang-soo showed me the fingerprint access log from your server room 2 days before Minji's team brought you the evidence. They had been watching the building. They saw who went in that night. You had this information. I had pieces of it. Not everything. Not fast enough. Lim wanted to build a case that would hold up, he didn't want to move prematurely and lose it. I was trying to get him enough to move before Minjae finished setting me up." She paused. "I was too slow." "The envelope," he said. "In the photograph. The one you gave to Cho Byung-hak. A copy of the schedule I found in your study. I was passing it to Lim's contact. Cho works for Lim's unit undercover. He is not connected to the Seo faction. That photograph was staged by Minjae. He knew Cho was someone you'd recognize as a street contact, so he made sure it looked like I was handing intelligence to a criminal intermediary." Seo Jun stared at her. He thought about what it would have looked like from the outside. A woman moving secretly through the city at night, passing envelopes to known underworld contacts, money disappearing from private accounts, attacks happening on her husband's operations. He thought about how clean it had looked. How complete. He thought about how close he had come. "He almost convinced me," Seo Jun said. "It was not a question." "I know," she said. She held his gaze. "That's why I couldn't tell you in that room the first night. I needed you to work through the evidence yourself. I needed you to find the crack on your own, because if I told you it was Min Jae, and you believed me without proof, and you went to confront him, he had everything prepared. He would have had something waiting. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, the city moved. Somewhere below, a car horn sounded briefly and then went silent. There's something else, she said. Her voice had changed. It had gone quieter. Flatter. Lim showed me communications that his unit intercepted last week. Between Min Jae and the CO faction leadership. She paused. They weren't just planning to replace you with someone from CO's side. Min Jae was planning to take over himself. He made a deal. He would hand them your full network, all your assets, all your people, in exchange for running the combined operation under the CO umbrella. He would be the boss. CO would have the territory. CO Jun said nothing. They set a date, she said. 3 days from now. There was to be a final move, something large enough to end it all at once. Lim believes they plan to kill you at your next senior meeting. Everyone in that room would either convert to Minji's side or be removed. It was going to be over in one night. He sat with that. 3 days. He looked at his wife, this woman who had spent 8 weeks walking through darkness alone, meeting informants in parking lots and market corridors, carrying information that could have gotten her killed at any moment, unable to tell the one person she was trying to protect because telling him was the thing most likely to get him killed. He looked at her and did not speak for a long moment. You should have told me, he said finally. I tried to protect you, she said. I know. But you should have told me. She looked at him steadily. Would you have believed me? He wanted to say yes. He sat with the question long enough to know that the honest answer was more complicated. He had trusted Min Jae for 13 years. Trust like that does not dissolve at the first word from someone outside the circle, no matter who that person is. I don't know, he said. She nodded. That's why. What came next was not simple. Nothing in his world ever was. He spent the following 18 hours working quietly, moving people he trusted absolutely into position, isolating Min Jae without triggering any alarm, coordinating with Ryu's team to compile the real evidence in a way that was airtight. He also reached a careful arrangement with Detective Lim Chang-soo, one that served both their interests without crossing lines that could not be uncrossed. Min Jae was brought in on the morning of the 3rd day. He came willingly, because Seo Jun had asked him to come and because he had no reason yet to believe anything had changed. He walked through the front door the way he always did, coat open, unhurried, the walk of a man who belonged somewhere. He greeted 2 people in the corridor. He accepted a cup of coffee from an assistant. He rode the elevator to the 14th floor without a trace of hesitation in his body. He walked into the 14th floor room with the dark carpet and tinted windows and sat down across from Seo Jun the way he had sat across from him 100 times before. Seo Jun laid the evidence on the table. Not the fabricated package. The real one. The fingerprint access logs. The actual transfer records. The intercepted communications between Min Jae and the CO faction. A full accounting of every piece of disinformation that had been fed through Minji's channel to frame Taijist. He laid it all out slowly, piece by piece, without speaking. Min Jae looked at each piece. His face went through several things, denial, calculation, and then, finally, something that settled into a terrible kind of stillness. How, he said. It doesn't matter how, Seo Jun said. Min Jae looked up. His eyes were the eyes of someone who had already run all the calculations and found no exit. But there was something else in them too, something that surprised Seo Jun even now. It was not the cold look of a man who had been caught at a strategy. It was something older and uglier. Something that had been sitting inside him for a long time. You know what I kept thinking about? Min Jae said quietly. When I started all of this, I kept thinking that you would have done the same. If our positions had been reversed, you would have looked at an opportunity and taken it. Seo Jun said nothing. Maybe I was wrong about that, Min Jae said. But by the time I realized it, it was already in motion. You could have stopped it at any point, Seo Jun said. No, Min Jae said. I couldn't. That's the thing you don't understand. Once you start something like this, stopping it is the same as dying. Seo Jun looked at him for a long moment. At the face he had known for 13 years. The face of the man who had stepped in front of a knife. He thought about all the years, the early ones, the ones when there had been nothing, when it had just been the two of them and a borrowed car and a set of phone numbers and the kind of reckless certainty that only very young men carry. He thought about sitting in hospitals and at funerals and in this very room, building something piece by piece that neither of them could have built alone. He thought about how grief and anger can live in the same space in the chest and how one does not cancel out the other. I know, Seo Jun said. And he did. He understood exactly what Min Jae meant. This world did not have a reverse gear. You moved forward or you were consumed. Min Jae had made a decision at some point, maybe a year ago, maybe two, and then the decision had made all the subsequent ones on his behalf. That did not change what it was. Seo Jun stood. You were like a brother to me, he said. Min Jae held his gaze and said nothing. That is the only reason this is not worse for you than it is going to be. He walked to the door. He did not look back. It took another 2 weeks to fully unravel what Min Jae had constructed. Some of it was structural, financial, operational, the work of carefully removing pieces that had been compromised without causing the rest to collapse. Some of it was personal, men who had not known what they were part of, men who had known exactly what they were part of, conversations that required him to decide who was redeemable and who was not. He made those decisions without flinching. That part was familiar. He had always been good at the part that required clarity. The part that was harder, the part that stayed with him in the quiet of the early morning when the city had not yet woken up, was the accounting he had to do with himself. He had looked at his wife across a table and believed, even for a moment, that she had betrayed him. He had listened to evidence built on lies and felt it settle inside him like truth. He had sent men to bring her to a room. He had locked the door. He had almost done something he could not have come back from. She had been trying to save him. That was the fact he sat with in those early morning hours. While he had been running operations, holding meetings, building walls between their lives to protect her from his world, she had been the one walking through the dark to protect him. She had carried it alone because she had no other choice, and she had done it without being asked, without being acknowledged, without even being able to tell him she was doing it. He thought about the question she had asked him on that first night in the safe house. Would you have believed me? He turned it over and over, the way you handle something sharp when you want to understand it without cutting yourself. He was honest with himself. In the end, yes, he believed he would have listened. But he also knew that listening and believing are not the same thing, and that Min Jae had been so close to him, had been so thoroughly woven into the fabric of how he operated and thought and trusted, that Taija standing in front of him pointing a finger at Min Jae would have been standing against 13 years of evidence to the contrary. She had understood that better than he had. He did not know exactly how to carry that. He had built his entire life on the idea that he was the one who protected, who saw, who anticipated danger before it arrived. And the one time it had mattered most, he had been the last one to see it. That was not the kind of thing that passed easily through a man who had built himself into what Seo Jun had built himself into. Seo Jun introduced her to his remaining senior men as his chief advisor. He said it simply, without softening or over-explaining, the way he said everything that mattered. The room received it the way rooms receive things they were not expecting, with a brief, collective readjustment. And then they moved on, because he was still Yoon Seo Jun, and when he spoke, people adjusted. She sat at the right side of the table. His right side, the seat Min Jae had held for 13 years, within a week, she was reading documents before they reached him, filtering what required his attention, organizing his schedule with a precision that his previous assistants had never managed. She remembered every name, every number, every detail that passed through a meeting. And she used them. She was extraordinary at it. He had been careful with her from the beginning. He had kept her at a measured distance not because he didn't love her, but because love in his world was a liability. Love was something an enemy could hold. So he had loved her the way he did everything, with control. With limits. With walls that he told himself were there to protect her. What she had done in those 8 weeks, alone, without asking him, without even telling him, was walk through the wall. Without breaking it. Without making a sound. She had simply moved through it, done what needed doing, and come out the other side. You cannot keep your walls up against someone who has already proven they were never trying to break them down. 3 weeks after the office began to reorganize itself around her presence, he came home before her for the first time. He was usually the last one home, meetings ran late, calls ran late, the nature of what he did meant that the hours after sunset often belonged to work. But he left early that evening. Deliberately. He went to the flower market near their neighborhood, the one that stayed open until 10, run by an old couple who had been there for 30 years. He bought flowers that were not roses. He bought protea, large, rust-colored blooms native to the continent she came from, that looked like nothing else. He had asked the woman at the stall what flower a person from East Africa might recognize from home. She had pointed to them without hesitation. He brought them home and put them in a vase on the dining table. He did not attach a note. He did not perform the gesture, he simply made it and then went to the kitchen and began attempting to make tea, which he was bad at. He heard the door when she came in. He heard her pause in the hallway. He heard the particular silence of a person standing still in front of something unexpected. Then she appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was still in her work clothes, a deep burgundy blazer, her braids pinned back. She was holding her bag in one hand. She was looking at him with an expression he had not seen on her face before. It was not quite surprise and not quite emotion, it was something between the two, something that made her look younger and completely unguarded in a way she almost never was. "Protea," she said quietly. "The woman at the stall said they grow wild in Ethiopia," he said. "They do." Her voice was soft. "My mother used to bring them in from the hills outside the city when I was small. I haven't seen them since I left home." He said nothing. He did not need to. She set her bag down. She crossed the kitchen slowly and stopped in front of him. She looked up at him, she had to look up, he was taller, and for a moment neither of them spoke, and the space between them was full of everything the last 2 months had been. Then she reached up and put her hand against his face. Her palm was warm against his jaw. Her thumb moved once, gently, across his cheekbone. It was the kind of touch that does not ask for anything, it just says, "I am here. I have always been here." He covered her hand with his. He held it there. "I have spent 12 years, he said quietly, becoming a man that nothing could touch. And the one thing that actually mattered, I almost destroyed it with my own hands. Seo Jun. Let me finish." His voice was low. "I am not good at this. You know that. I am better at burning things down than building them. But I will spend however long I have left being the kind of man who deserves to stand next to you. That is not a promise I'm making lightly. And I don't make promises I can't keep." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she rarely did. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest, and she closed her eyes, and she stayed there. He wrapped both arms around her and held her the way a man holds something he came too close to losing, not hard, not desperate, but completely. With everything he had. They stood like that in the kitchen for a long time. The tea was forgotten. The city moved outside. Inside, there was only the warmth of the room and the two of them, and the particular silence of people who no longer needed to explain themselves to each other. Two people who, by all accounts, should have been torn apart. A betrayal that deep, a frame-up that clean, a moment of doubt that almost became a decision he could never take back, but it didn't. Because, the woman he had kept at a distance trying to protect her, had refused to let the distance become permanent. And the man who had built himself into something untouchable had finally learned that the strongest thing he ever did was choose to trust again. That if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Until next time, take care of yourselves.